See what this thing is doing. New. Managing moderators can support your channel in even more ways. Introducing managing moderators, these users have the same capabilities as standard moderators, but in addition, they can manage blocked words and change chat modes in live. No idea what that means. Right. Hello, me. Again, so this is, I've now moved my experiment to still being live, and I made a big thing about it. Should be on Facebook. Where's my eyes? Where are my eyes in all of this? And then a friend of mine said, maybe do it on YouTube because, and then he gave a whole lot of really good reasons, which I cannot for the life of me think of what they are right now. But I'm doing it because it's the same idea. It's just that, well, maybe it's because even though like there's no one watching it other than me, according to this, I think, there's the potential that it could reach a wider audience. And not necessarily that's the point of it, but I suppose it is part of the point of it, is because you want to engage something outside of your regular, let's call it, context. Ah, there goes OJ. OJ, I'm going to let him out because it's alive. Okay. Go bark like a mad dog. So, yeah, I still have no idea how this is going to work. But, you know, that's part of what it is. I repeat that, what I said yesterday. It's, you don't know what the thing is in art, in a drawing or whatever it is, until you actually put it there and see what it is. And the way you see what it is you reflect on it after the fact. And you also get feedback. There's a feedback process, and that leads then to something else. So this is not then scripted. So I don't know. I did think in the last 24 hours, because what then starts to happen is, the truth is, I don't want to stand here and look like like I don't know what I'm doing, even though that's an important part of it, possibly. And I did do some drawing on Thursday or Friday when I did the last one, and it was just so strange to draw in with a camera on me, because weird to be watched when you're doing this kind of drawing. So I've often done drawings in a live context in front of large groups of people, and that's kind of fun because, but that's a different kind of drawing. You realize it's absolutely performance then, because the way you draw is kind of, you're performing it, because there's an act. There's a bit of an act going on. There's a bit of like, you know, it's the big difference between doing this performance thing, well, not performance, but you're drawing on your own. Then when you're drawing on your own, it's just, you can make mistakes. You can then quietly cover them up. You can get away with a lot more. But when you're doing it live, you've got to pretend that that's all part of the plan. You just have to do that. And what then happens is, when you realize something is all part of the plan, it becomes part of the plan. And it actually gives the quality of what you're making something uniquely different. And possibly more, I won't say more interesting, but just different. It's something else. So the fact of performing it makes it something else. So it's still a drawing, still the same thing on a surface, on a canvas, but there's something qualitatively happening which is different, and it's because you're doing it. So that's what I'm saying. I think this is that. This, I could be in my studio by myself, which is fine, things will happen. But the fact that I'm putting a camera on myself and waiting for people to observe me changes the whole thing completely. I'm standing here right now, slightly nervous, but actually very heightened. There's a very heightened sense about me. So I'm curious about that. And in the last 24 hours, I was thinking, if I do this, I can't just stand here like an idiot. Or again, I can just stand here like an idiot, or I can, but what did occur to me is I was thinking about, the one thing I was thinking about is this idea of being unqualified. Like I was actually lying in bed, I think it was on Saturday morning, and I had one of those lie-ins when, I don't know if you've ever had, you must have had this, I mean, I think you could generally say that our lives are quite busy, so we don't generally have lie-ins and all. Well, I don't generally have lie-ins. And on Saturday morning, I had one of those incredible ones where my body just relaxed 1,000%. I just lay there in this, I have these occasionally where it's just like, oh, it's just the most incredibly, just the stillness. And then just waves of thoughts and ideas just flowed over me. And I got really excited about this one thought there, because the one thing I'm trying to do is, I've realized, and this is what this is I'm really interested in the idea of doing work in front of people. Performance is the word for it. Thanks, OJ. Thanks for your contribution. And but I'm thinking, I'm approaching various institutions, various people about wanting to develop this, and I'm thinking the whole time, what exactly is it that I'm wanting to do? And I don't actually know. Like I do have some idea. I mean, I've done some performance work before, but I know it's an evolving thing. So I'm approaching people saying, yes, no, I'm performing at the interface of art and science. But as I'm writing this, I realize I also don't exactly know what that means. But that is absolutely fine. Because then what I realize is I am profoundly unqualified, right? So I'm a trained scientist. I mean, so that's my qualification, but I'm a very unqualified artist. And I realized, okay, so that's something that sort of has always kind of like niggled at me. Like, what, you're calling yourself an artist, you do drawings, you work with scientists, but you have never been trained as an artist. So you don't necessarily know what you're doing. You're just doing, all right? And for a long time, that bothered me. Just something niggled. I won't say it bothered me, niggled at me, because it never stopped me from doing it, but it did niggle. And I've associated myself with a lot of contemporary artists, and I love the work they do. And I'm always trying to understand what it is that they do, because it feels like I'm on a slightly different planet. And I'm wondering what that planet is. And so I guess what I've realized is that not knowing, the best way to explain it is if I knew what I didn't know, or if I had the knowledge, I'm probably much less likely to have done some of the things that I have attempted to do, because it would have been ridiculous. I mean, I've often heard, when I did the art science encounters between artists and scientists online, I was told, but this is a vast field. People have been thinking about the interface of art and science for years. And then I thought, oh my God, what am I doing? Who the hell am I to try and now bring this to the attention of an audience? Like, I'm not qualified. But then I realized that in itself is not a qualification, but it's not a disabler. It shouldn't be a disabler. In fact, that I now think is my greatest gift as an artist, as a not entrepreneur, as a explorer in this field of which is peripherally associated with art and science. It's my greatest quality, because I don't sit in any camp. I'm no longer in the sciences, and I don't really sit comfortably in the art world either, because I'm not qualified. But that really is where I want to be, because ultimately the place where I thrive is in those spaces in between. And then you're going to ask questions that are going to be unexpected. And also, this takes me to my other reason why I think being unqualified is so important. And now I'm playing with the word unqualified, because when I was a scientist, my biggest breakthrough, I would say, was I was doing an experiment in the lab, part of my PhD, and I was trying to figure out some problem. And the way I said about doing that is I read a whole lot of publications, and I got deeply into this methodology for a certain kind of system of understanding what's going on in the cell, some kind of measurement of the cell. And I developed a whole methodology around what I understood from the references, from the publications. I then set up the experiment and then did the experiment and got a really interesting result. But what I realized after the fact is that the experiment I set up because I completely misunderstood the minutiae of the experiment that was explained in the publications. But that misunderstanding gave me my best insight as a scientist. So there's something really interesting that happens from, let's say, misunderstanding, or can we call it a disunderstanding? It's like there's a body of knowledge out there, but there's so many ways to sort of go at it. And one of the ways is a bit like, I guess, is a misunderstanding is not misunderstanding. It's just, it's just seeing something from an unanticipated point of view, which might be wrong in the strict sense. But like anything, it has unintended consequences that can lead to something novel and interesting. And I think this is true in the arts as well. Like I'm now a big, one of the things that I'm most interested in now is these accidents. That's serendipity, really. It's a form of serendipity. Like how can we increase the probability of wrong things happening that turn out to be the right things? And one of the ways is to dive into the thing in a way of, in a not knowing sort of way, to see what actually comes from that. If you're too invested or too kind of knowledgeable, that is its own way of severely limiting what you are able then to do. Knowledge is constraint. Another word for knowledge, you're constraining the world. You're constraining what you can know about the world, in the hope that that then kind of pushes you towards new knowledge. So I guess my approach of not knowing is sort of setting up misconstraints or realigning constraints that I don't know about or that I'm not quite getting, but it's leading to its own kind of body of knowing, own way of knowing. And I think that's what I'm interested in. I'll just see if I can turn this around. So on the wall here, I noticed, this is a thing I'm working on at the moment, but there's a line in it that I just want to point out. I noticed this the other day. I've got there, the power of disinterpretation. And that is what I'm interested in. So really disinterpretation. Let's call it disinterpretation. I like that. And that's the story. So that is really the story. I've been talking for like 14 minutes and I'm now going to, in the extraordinary discomfort of drawing in front of you, I've got nothing else to do, but I think I'm going to just leave this camera running, just see what happens. Leave it running for another sort of 15 minutes or so. I may talk to you, I may not. I may turn. One of the things I'm going to try and do is get a camera that follows me around a bit. I went to a gym session this morning with my niece, who's trains me. I think she's trying to kill me, actually. So, you know, but I mean, she's very good, but I think she's trying to kill me. Anyway, one of the things that I noticed there in the studio, in the gym studio, was this kind of fancy camera that follows me around. Well, it didn't follow me around because I think it's used for people who are more Instagrammable than I am, who are better, you know, like if you're trying to promote a gym workout, this might not be the thing that you're going to want to promote the gym workout with, but the device is there. And I think I could use it for more sort of artistic purposes, shall we say. So currently we can't follow me around, but I'm going to just walk around and, you know, that's it. Scratch my ear, but I'll try, you know, I'm still extremely self-conscious of this whole thing, but that's what it is. turn the camera around. Oh, I'm also getting a little lapel microscope. So I'll turn the camera around, and I'm more likely to be in that part of the room. Yep, there I am. There you are. Okay. As well as all the brownish ones. Actually, before I do that, I was humming and awing about whether I should explain what I'm doing while I'm in here. And I thought, no, it's pure if I just kind of do but you know, as I said, this is an iterative thing, and right now I'm feeling compelled to explain what I'm doing over here. See if I can actually explain it. Yeah, because I think it'll be interesting to share what I'm looking for here. So one of my projects or directions is I have constructed this machine which is called the Evolver. I may post a link to that underneath here in case you're not familiar with it. But essentially that's a thing that when I first made that, I realized I'd made a portrait of myself. I'd made something that reminds me of myself. Not in the way you draw a face, but actually in the way it's behavior. So it's what is interesting about the behavior of the Evolver is that it's what you'd call non-teleological. Okay? In other words, a toaster, we all know toasters. Those things are very purposeful, right? We use them 99.9% of the time to toast bread. Maybe 1% of the time, or 0.01% of the time, we might use the toaster to knock a nail in the wall. But it's unexpected if that happens. You know, it's like really a low probability outcome if we start to use the toaster to bash nails into a brick wall or a cardboard wall, because a brick wall just would be a stupid idea. Now, my Evolver, and just to briefly describe it, is made of record players and bicycle wheels and a umbrella parts. Made of those things for a very good reason, is that I am what you'd call mechanically challenged, all right? I was never one of those kids who was interested in how motors worked, but I'm very interested in motion. Like, motion is probably the thing that I'm most interested in, is like whether regular motion, chaotic motion, the way things feed back with each other to change the evolution of the motion, of the behavior of the system. That really is probably underlying everything that I do to some extent. But this machine, I'm not good at building things. I'm no engineer. And that is abundantly and overwhelmingly obvious that I'm no engineer when you look at my machine, all right? You can see this was not made by an engineer. But as a result, it has this, what I call eccentric behavior, which reminds me again of myself. And what it is, it's 3 turntables bought from a local shop somewhere. And they do this. It's essentially a drawing machine. Does very regular and quite predictable drawings. But then I've adapted it so that the edges of this very regular machine drives chaotic behavior, irregular, untunable, and can't control the behavior of this machine. Unlike a toaster, which you can pretty much control. Except me, I'm one of the few people who probably struggles even to control a toaster. But you can't control this behavior. So it has a regular core, much like my breathing, much like my heartbeat, except when my niece is training me in gym. That gets less regular then. But the edges, the extremities of the machine are wildly unpredictable, different every time, untunable. So that reminds me of myself. I know I'm speaking to you right now, but I don't know exactly what I'm going to say or when I'm going to say it. The words that are coming out, my hands flail about, and I can't quite predict where they're going to go, what they're trying to say. So I made this machine, the self-portrait of myself, and I thought, okay, so here I've got this machine. It's a model of myself. Now, the scientist in me wonders, is it possible then to measure the machine to understand myself? That's my hypothesis. That's the scientist asking these questions. Now, a scientist would say that it's probably not possible, and it's not important as to whether it's possible or not. It's kind of become, the machine has evolved to the point where I am interacting with it to ask questions like this to see what emerges out of my measurements of the machine. The machine is measuring me, I am measuring it. The important thing is, when I'm asking these questions, I'm asking them as the scientist. But most importantly, I am inhabiting the character of a scientist to ask questions about the nature of science as an artist. Does that make any sense? I hope that it does. So the point about the drawing behind me, which I'm getting to, is part of what I do now is I have performances. I've recently had a physicist interacting with the machine to try and see if he could measure the behavior of the machine. And actually, I was measuring the physicist while he was measuring the behavior of the machine. That's a really whole other story. But then I thought, well, let me broaden this. Let me just use this machine to measure any performance. So if I'm doing a performance, the machine is going in the room, making measurements, recordings of the room. Now, this drawing here was a measurement, and actually this one was kind of cheating a little bit because I didn't measure at the time of the performance. It was a Zoom performance, but I was talking to a philosopher, Professor Tibor Molnar, a philosopher of science, about philosophy and science and how philosophies influence science. And I had taken notes on this piece of paper over here. And I thought, well, let me just see if I can measure the notes. So it's not exactly what I wanted to do, but I thought, okay, this is kind of a test. Let's just see what happens. So I basically set up the notes, and I got the machine to interpret the notes essentially by recording over it, by running a pen over it, by interacting with the notes directly. And then I used that as a basis. So all of the machine drawings here are done by the machine, all the lines, the blue, the red. And then what I did on the side is I've written in very minute text, the text from the story of Genesis. It's another thing that's been deeply influential to me, is I'm really interested in the story of Genesis. Why? It's still something I'm trying to work out, but it's all about our creation mythology. This is probably a good reason why I'm doing all of this, because I think a lot of what I'm doing here is I'm trying to understand what I'm doing, because I don't fully. I feel like, and I'm very comfortable not understanding, because my nature is to want to search, is a searcher. I'm looking in amongst everything to try and understand the world I inhabit. Science is the understanding of the world as it is, and I'm trying to understand the world as I find myself in it, which is kind of what artists are doing. They're trying to understand the world they are in. That's sort of where it's a nice distinction between art and science. So why have I put biblical text in? It's an ongoing dialogue that I'm having between why am I interested in the biblical story and where does it tie into science and who we are right now. So one of the things that came up in the conversation with the philosopher was, I am fairly convinced, again, and I'm coming at it from this place of not knowing, that all of our thinking, everything we think in our particular culture, now, yeah, I'm specifically talking about Judeo-Christian culture. I'm Jewish, so that's the culture that I come from. That's where, and I think so many of our thoughts, unknown to us, impossible for us to know, because they are the context in which we do our thinking, are influenced by that narrative that sits underneath all of Western tradition. And it's the context of Western tradition. It's not the content. It is the space in which we do our thinking. So that influences in ways that we possibly were unable to measure because we're trying to measure from outside the system into the system, a bit like quantum physics. The measurer is part of the system, but you can't observe the measurer, and the measurer collapses the system. Outside the system, inside the system. We are, in some sense, dealing with that way of thinking about our own knowledge. And sitting underneath all of our knowledge is our mythology, our narrative that stems from this ancient Judeo-Christian tradition. Informing even our science in ways that we cannot directly know is my belief. And that is why I'm using that text to sit underneath these other questions. Now, to even make this even not more complicated, but possibly this stage more complicated, or hopefully not more complicated, is I'm curious now to see how all of these interact now with the machine's measurement. And now we are entering a new age in our own evolution, where for the first time this year, we've seen these large language models, ChatGPT. And for the first time, I've really begun to think we are now at this really interesting cusp of our own evolution, where the machines are we are less able to know, or becoming less able to know what is driven by a machine and what is driven by us. Feels like in the way that the creation mythology that I'm interested in, that sits at the heart of our Judeo-Christian culture, we are now at another stage of our emerging culture, where sitting underneath that is the machine's creation mythology. So that is where the thinking is now going. I think I'm dealing with the machine's creation mythology, and it's wrapped up in somehow in ours. These ideas are forming. These ideas are forming. What I've tentatively called this work is Homage to the Human. It feels like all of this stuff, all of these ideas conflicting and competing and fighting for understanding of the world, or fighting for relevance in the world. Is that folly? Is there any hope of actually achieving some kind of understanding? Sometimes when I'm deep in the text, I feel like there is. I feel like there's deep. The one thing that's become risen right to the surface is how the words we use have lost their impact. Now, I remember this, again, like 20 years ago. I remember being in a car park in Johannesburg, eating an ice cream. And I remember saying to a friend of mine, "This ice cream is awesome." This woman came up behind me and says, "You can't call an ice cream awesome, because what then of sunset? What then of creation? What then of who we are as humans and the things that we believe and hold with? If an ice cream is awesome, where does that leave the rest of existence?" And at the time I thought, this woman I don't know. It's just, what's wrong with this woman? Why is she going on like this? But I've come more and more and more to this realization: our words are deeply impoverished because we throw them around. They've lost meaning. So we say things, but we don't mean them. Okay? Very often we say things and we don't mean what we say. The more you do that, the more words lose their meaning. And reading the text from this Genesis story has really taken me down that rabbit hole. One line in particular, where Isaac had a blessing for Esau, but Jacob intervened via his mother's sort of wanting and took the blessing. And then there wasn't one left over for Esau. And I thought, why can't you just have another blessing? But then I realized there's a power in the word. The words themselves are possibly objects. Maybe they aren't infinitely abundant. Maybe there's only so many promises out there that we can make. And if we throw them around, they lose their content. They lose their ability to hold things. They can't hold things anymore. And maybe I think if there's something that's emerging out of this work behind me, it's somehow tied to that. It's somehow, if you go up, read it really closely, you'll see that the words themselves are not really legible. Go up really close. You can see the odd word. Jacob, I can see. But the words themselves are actually not that legible. And initially I was quite excited by that, because I thought, much like with, well, I wasn't excited by it, but I noticed that I didn't want to control that. I didn't want to make them legible. I thought there's something about words losing their legibility, losing their meaning. That is that this work is, the work is trying to say, not what I'm trying to say, because I just reflect on what it's doing. And that then became a theme, is words themselves are losing their legibility. And what does that mean? What are the implications of that? I've been talking for 31 minutes, and I vowed that I wouldn't go on for longer than that. So I'm going to end this now, and I'll share it to Facebook. And yeah, let's see where this goes. I spoke a lot more than I thought I would, but I'm just going with what comes up. So that is what that was. I did attempt to start a drawing, to continue the drawing, but then thought entered my head and I had to share it. I don't actually know how to switch this off. Are you sure you want to stop streaming? Yes. End. All right. Thanks everyone for joining. And we will connect soon.